In this tutorial video, we're going to be looking at the same time period as the Progressive Era, where the Progressive Era dealt with a lot of domestic reforms and things that happen inside the United States. Now we're going to start looking at foreign policy and how we interacted with other countries. So we decide we need to expand. Why do we need to expand? Well, for various reasons. One of the reasons is going to be the need for raw materials and markets. So whenever we start doing, and this is so that we have raw materials for our factories and markets to sell goods to. And when we say markets, that means people in other countries. So we need more raw materials so that we can send them to our factories, we can make goods out of them, and then we can sell those manufactured goods to people either in our own colonies or in other parts of the world. So that whole mercantile policy of mercantilism, like we saw in the U.S. prior to the American Revolution. Another reason is for strategy. One of the big advocates for expansion was Alfred Thayer Mann. He is going to be a big part that has to do with the Navy. He is going to want to, he says that to achieve this world power and to have colonies, we need to have a powerful Navy, and we need to have a powerful trade network, and we need naval bases in these colonies that are away from the United States that can be places where our ships can refuel and we can have trade needed to support these ships. And so it's very strategic for why we needed to expand. Another reason is going to be nationalism. Remember, nationalism is basically an extreme word for patriotism. And this is going to be the idea of having colonies is basically going to show that we are more powerful and that we can be up there with the big boys like the European powers, and that we should go and get colonies before there's absolutely nothing left. Another reason was more of the attitude towards other people. This whole idea that that Americans a lot of times felt like they were a superior race and they should rule others. Some progressives in this time period felt more like that we would be helping others, such as missionaries. And they were usually your first group going in, and they were usually going to convert natives to Christianity. So they're going to usually be the first ones into these new colonies. So other parts of the world and how we interacted with these parts. Involvement with Asia. During this time, before what we call the open door policy, which it's pretty self-explanatory, before that, different parts of Europe had what they call spheres of influence in certain parts of China, and this was for purposes of trade. So maybe Great Britain has the area around Hong Kong, and France can go and trade in another part around China, and so they had their own little territory where they traded. So we decided to emphasize what we call an open door policy, which gives equal trading rights for foreign nations in China. So no more of the spheres of influence. The whole reason we wanted to do this is because we wanted to make sure the United States had a shot to trade with the Chinese and to have another market for American goods. Our role in the Caribbean. This is probably one that can sometimes be controversial, if you will. One of the things that comes from this is President Roosevelt, what he calls the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. He also refers to, this becomes known as the Big Stick Policy, which is a famous quote from Roosevelt where he said, you know, to walk softly and carry a big stick, which he used to justify, you know, sending troops into various parts to kind of be what we call a police power. And so to kind of help other parts, and we know in the Monroe Doctrine, this is a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So we know in the Monroe Doctrine that they said no interference in the Western Hemisphere. You don't come and mess in our backyard. We won't go and mess around in yours. But he said there's a corollary where we can act as a police power to other countries in our hemisphere. So we can go and help out those countries, specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean. Another tactic during this time with the Caribbean is called dollar diplomacy, which is, again, a little self-explanatory. we decided we're going to kind of show our influence through economic assistance. So this one is all about helping with giving loans, because if we can help the Caribbean countries, then that keeps European powers from helping the Caribbean countries, and then we can still keep that market available for us. And we also even sent troops in to make sure the money was paid back. And so we did go and interfere, but it was being a police power, which was a very controversial concept. This is from the Roosevelt Corollary. This is a quote that is often referred to, so it's good to be familiar with it. Chronic wrongdoing, which results in general loosening of the ties of civilized society, may in America, as elsewhere, ultimately require intervention by some civilized nation. And in the Western Hemisphere, the adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing, to exercise an international police power. So what Roosevelt's saying in this is that, if there's a country that's not doing so well, or maybe not paying their debts, then we may have to go and intervene, the civilized nation being the United States, we may have to go intervene, and in order to make sure that people don't come in and interfere in the Western Hemisphere, we may, and I like how he says reluctantly, like we really don't want to do it, and then in really extreme cases, we may have to go in and be a police power, such as trying to get Nicaragua to pay us back money, so we send Marines there. So this is his justification for having interference in Latin America. Another major political and foreign policy move during this time is going to be the construction of the Panama Canal. So why do we even need this canal? Well, let's look at some geography here. So let's say you are in New York City and you want to go on your lovely sailboat because you don't want to ride on that train that's uncomfortable to San Francisco, or you have a big shipping container that can only go by ship and it needs to get to San Francisco. Well, before you had to go all the way around the tip of South America to get to San Francisco. So this would take roughly 68 days. It's about 13,000 miles. So the proposal was, let's find this little sliver in Panama and let's build a canal. And so when you build this canal, if you notice, you go from 13,000 miles to 5,200 miles, and this only takes 20 days by ship. So whenever you're trying to, and so again, this is really important for trade and for movement of our Navy. So these are going to be the main reasons that we want to build the Panama Canal. Challenges to building the canal: it's in an area that's very it's in an area that's kind of like jungle, so you had issues with yellow fever and a lot of workers getting sick, but they also found the origin of yellow fever as a result of all this. So unfortunate for the people that got it, but fortunate for us later. It is 51 miles long, and it took 10 years to complete. So again, a lot of time and a lot of money. It ended up costing actually about thousands of lives. And you also had the challenge in that part of that area with elevation. So they had to come up with a series of locks where the ship comes in and it locks, fills up with water, lifts your ship up to the next elevation, and then you cut across, and you do that across the 51-mile canal. So this area, so there was a lot of other, mudslides. It wasn't a pretty project. It was great in the end, but it wasn't a pretty project at the time. Another controversial event that has to do with imperialism during this time is going to do with Hawaii and how we got Hawaii. Hawaii was its own country. They had a queen, Leleakulani. I like to call her Queen Lili for short. And she was, during this time, there were a lot of Americans there, mostly plantation owners and missionaries trying to convert the natives to Christianity. A lot of sugar and pineapple plantations in Hawaii. And so in the 1890s, Queen Lili decides that she wants to take political power back from these American landowners and plantation owners that have had so much power in this area. And then these American landowners overthrow her in 1893. So at that point, Sanford B. Dole, you've heard of Dole Pineapple, that's this man with the lovely mustache and beard. He ends up becoming, he leads their provisional government while it tries to figure out a plan with the United States to annex the islands. So it is annexed, kind of like Texas. So it was added to the United States as a territory in 1898. And the big results of this is you're going to have better military presence in the Pacific. The whole reason we were there to begin with was this was a refueling station out in the Pacific. And then it's going to lead to more military presence in the area. Another major event that has to do with imperialism during this time period is the Spanish-American War. This is a very short-lived war. Really, the main thing you need to know for the Spanish-American War, you need to know how did we get involved, which is kind of it doesn't take very long to explain, and more importantly, the effects of this war, because the effects of this war really paved the way for us on the world stage. So why did we get involved? Well, one reason was what we call yellow journalism. You see those tabloids today. These are usually your journalists that would over exaggerate certain things or maybe kind of stretch the truth. And so they would depict that. So, for example, with the Spanish-American War, they depicted the Spaniards as these evil, murderous people. And whenever we had the USS Maine, which was near Cuba, and it exploded. And so instead of having a newspaper entry that says, the USS Maine explodes, we, of course, the yellow journalists write headlines such as "Crisis is at hand of Spanish treachery." So they wanted to make it sound like it was even worse, which helped convince people to go to war with Spain. So we go to war. It's like I said, it's a very short-lived war, but the biggest thing that comes out of this is Spain loses its territories, what little it has left. So we end up getting the Philippines, we end up getting Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Guam, which of course these are all small islands in the Caribbean, and then, well, Guam is in the Pacific, Philippines are over in the Pacific, and so these are all islands pretty much. But we got what was left of Spain's colonial empire, and then now we have territories and we have colonies, and this is going to show us as a world power, which is a huge, huge deal. And now that we have more territories, we have that whole why we want to do this anyways. We have more resources and we have people to trade with.